Welcome to Nostalgia Alley. We have a special program tonight. As you can tell by our set, this fabulous old-time radio. We are going to be talking about radio, old-time radio, going way, way back into time to talk about some fabulous shows. Our guest tonight, Tom Jeron, who is the SUMA executive producer. All the shows you see rolling all the time, well, Tom's the guy who does them. And he and I have a passion for nostalgia. And Tom decided to be on the show. We're going to talk about radio. Tom, how did you get interested in old-time radio? You're a young guy.
Yeah,
what was the spark?
36 today.
36 today?
36 years old today.
Tomorrow I'll be...
tomorrow you'll be 36?
My 80th birthday tomorrow.
80th?
80.
80. You don't look a day over 84.
How'd you get interested in old radio?
I got interested in old-time radio in a very strange way. I was at my church back in the 70s. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, and we had a concert with an organist who had come forward who was blind. His name was Eric Weber, and he came to our church to give us a concert. And the big thing was is that he supposedly could make the organ sound like a Hawaiian guitar. And that was pretty cool. I have to say it. And he did do it. And so, like afterwards, everybody's going up and mulling around talking.
Early acid rock.
And you know, the kid, being incredibly astute and very, very, very couth with what I was saying, I said, "So you can't watch TV? What do you do?" And he was like, "Well, I don't watch TV. I listen to old-time radio programs." And I said, "Old-time radio programs?" And they're like, "What?" And he said, "Like The Shadow and like Superman." I said, "Superman? I'm into Superman." So he started sending me tapes, and the first tapes he sent me, he was in this group that actually exchanged them. They copied them and sent them to the next person, the next person, the next person. So it was this kind of real backwoods, grassroots kind of way of exchanging the tapes. And of course, you never knew what you were getting, and they were kind of fuzzy because they had been copied a million times. But I got some great stuff. I got Superman, I got The Shadow, I got Mystery in the Air with Peter Lorre. And they were just fabulous programs.
You have yourself a big collection of antique radio shows. How many do you have? Did you ever count them?
No, I have never counted them, but it's many, many hundreds of hours of stuff.
Wow.
And there's some really neat stuff. We spent, my mom in the 70s also spent many hours for me taping WOR's Jubilee celebration with John Gambling. And what they had done is they picked up anything that was considered nostalgic radio and ran it as bits and talked about it. John Gambling had these great programs where they would run an episode of The Shadow and then get done and talk about who was in it and why and how it was done and what was going on in that period of time, and then run some news bits. And we gathered just from that probably 40 hours worth of really fine stuff that's just really incredible.
Now back then they didn't have tapes, they had discs, these big round discs they put on a turntable, made out of steel, I think.
They were made out of steel, and then sometime later Bakelite, some larger Bakelite discs, but they were huge.
I know. And I guess not a lot of them left today.
I have very few, although a guy out in the Midwest started a company called Radio Spirits that now is actually in Connecticut, and he's spent his life collecting what's left, whether it's on tape or on disc. And he's managed to get quite a few of the original programs on disc and then clean them up, remaster them, put them on CD, put them on cassette. Actually, you can go out on the internet and listen. There's a show called When Radio Was that's hosted by, I always forget his name.
Sounds like Bigger Than Bread.
No, it's the comedian from the 60s who ended up doing a lot of those Stan Freberg.
Yeah.
He hosts a show called When Radio Was for them, and certain AM stations, not around here unfortunately, but if you go up into New York State or out in Pennsylvania on a Saturday night or a Sunday night, you can hear 2 or 3 hours of fantastic programming.
You have a great story. I know a lot of famous people on radio. Orson Welles was The Shadow.
Orson Welles was The Shadow.
But he did a lot of other radio shows.
Did.
How did he do that?
He did it, well, Mercury Theater was his big program, and he also had some actual stage theaters in New York that he worked Broadway. And he had to get from show to show, like all the time. And for instance, when he was doing The Shadow and War of the Worlds and things of that nature, he hired a private ambulance.
I love it.
And they ran around town with the lights blaring so that he could get from show to show. And I don't know how legal that would be or how well it was looked upon today, but back then you got away with it.
And another guy who we all know, if you guys are old enough to remember, Beat the Clock with Bud Collyer. Big thing on TV in the 1950s, like 50 to 56. And Bud Collyer was a very famous character on the radio.
Yes, he was. He was Superman and Clark Kent for over 15 years. Amazing stuff. And Superman's show was actually, it started, obviously with the comic book. And that's what I loved, because as a kid, I mean, a comic book, the TV show, and the George Reeves TV show was what I remember in reruns. But they used to run that and the Adam West Batman show back to back on Channel 5 or Channel 11. And I always used to think that, boy, Superman never has any, powerful guys to beat up on. They're always just guys with guns. So it was very refreshing when we got the radio programs, when I started hearing these radio programs, and he had legitimate villains and kryptonite and all these great things. But what always amazed me about Bud Collyer's performance was, I mean, such a tremendous range of voice. This is a job for Superman. He went way down low. And then he ended up doing the cartoons, the Paramount cartoons, which were $1 million
Oh, he did the cartoons?
budget. Yeah, he
Really?
was the voice for the Paramount cartoons because he was Superman. And then even in the 60s, when they did other cartoons, there was nobody else to do them. They hired Bud Collyer, and all the guys from the old Superman show, even the narrators, were the voices for these cartoons that Filmation did in the 60s. And it was just fascinating because, I mean, they had quite a career off of that from 1939 on up. But they had no sponsor at the beginning.
Oh, really?
They were on Mutual. And Mutual said, let's see what we can do. And then later on, they picked up Kellogg's Pep. But all of those things in Superman, the Daily Planet, the character of Perry White, the news editor, Jimmy Olsen, were all created on the radio show and then backfed into the comic books. And then even in the 40s and 50s, and still now today, they have a comic called World's Finest, where Superman and Batman teamed up. Comic book didn't happen first. They teamed up on radio first. And then DC Comics said, oh, that's a good idea. Why don't we try that? And all these things kind of happened in reverse. I don't know that that would happen today. And then even Kryptonite, Superman's Achilles heel, was created on the radio program.
You mentioned the Mutual Network. What was the Mutual Network?
Mutual Network was kind of a grouping of independent stations that got together to say, well, we can also network much like ABC or NBC or CBS. And we can put quality program out there, but it was a WOR, and it was this large station in Chicago, and it was a large station in LA, where they could blanket the nation, much like syndicated TV today.
Like a superstation,
like a superstation.
Like Ted Turner's TBS is a
And we said, let's see what we can do. And they had, and many times, finer programming than what was on the networks.
And able to get probably better sponsorship because of the range of the show. Another thing that was great, the Green Hornet.
Oh, fantastic.
Tell us about the Green Hornet.
Well, the Green Hornet's character, many people don't know this, but he's a descendant of the Lone Ranger.
Get out.
I'm telling you, in the writing,
Really?
the Lone Ranger, the Green Hornet, I don't know if it's his great-grandson or great-great-grandson, but it comes down the line from his family. And the Green Hornet, I don't know, too much about the program. I just love to listen to it.
I know that in the Second World War, Kato was a Japanese butler, but during the Second World War, he became a Filipino butler. That's always very interesting the way they adopted that.
Yeah.
Also, we're talking about the Lone Ranger, and back then you had radio names, not like today. You had radio names, and the guy who played the Lone Ranger, it's a real radio name, Brace Beamer.
Brace Beamer.
I love Brace
Cool
Beamer.
name.
That's a radio guy.
And there's been some talk that he played him on television at some point as well. I've been looking into that a little bit because the only one I knew who played him on TV was Clayton Moore. He was the voice of the Lone Ranger for such a long time. There were a couple other actors who did it, but he was the one that people remember the most.
And also interesting, you said that the I Love Lucy show basically kind of started on the radio.
Absolutely started on radio. Lucille Ball was on a program called My Favorite Husband, and My Favorite Husband had her and Richard Denning, and it was if you heard the program, you'd say, "Oh, these are Lucy scripts." They're the same thing. It was the same idea. They had neighbors. The neighbors were a little more affluent, but the neighbor was played by Gail Gordon, and his wife was Bea Benaderet. Okay, so it was all these same kind of group of people that always kind of stuck together. Later on, Bea Benaderet worked for Desi Lou. Gail Gordon worked for Desi Lou. The same writers and producers, Jess Oppenheimer, Madeline Pugh. I always forget his name. But in any case, the same writing staff that became the I Love Lucy writing staff worked on My Favorite Husband. And My Favorite Husband, all of a sudden they said, well, we'd like to take this to television. And Lucy said, well, the only way we're taking it to television is if Desi plays my husband. And they said, Desi Arnaz is going to play your husband? Who's going to believe that? She says, well, we've been married for like 15 years. I'm sure somebody would do it. And they had to fight CBS tooth and nail to make that happen. And subsequently, they went out and did kind of like a vaudeville tour to get people to see what they were like on stage together. But the same concept of the husband and wife in the show, Richard Dane played a banker, but
Wow.
it was very similar.
You know what we're going to do? We're talking about old radio shows. Maybe we can listen to some old radio shows. Does this
That
old
would be
thing work?
great. Well, sometimes.
Well, let's see. Let's turn it on. And let's give it a good tap.
Yeah, you got to wait for the tubes.
We got to wait for the tubes to warm.
Good evening, friends of the Inner Sanctum. This is your host to welcome you through the squeaking door into the land of ghosts, vampires, and other gay, hilarious people.
Good evening, Mr. North and South American, all the ships and clippers at sea. Let's go to France, flight, London.
Mr. Betty.
Now, in cooperation with police and federal law enforcement departments throughout the United States, the only national program that brings you authentic police case history, Gangbusters.
By George, oh my goodness!
That's terrific. Oh, it still works. This thing's got to be from the 1940s.
Pretty
It works
cool.
better than I do, and I'm
It
from
is,
the 1940s.
it is from the 40s.
Another great thing. You know, you hear the term soap opera. How did,
Yes.
and that started on TV. You know, not TV, but radio. Then went to TV. Why the name soap opera?
Well, you see, soap opera was because many companies like Procter & Gamble pushed soap. And they thought, well, the place to sell soap is to housewives, and housewives are the people who are going to listen to these drama programs. So why not housewives soap operas? And it stuck.
And some of the soap operas, like The Guiding Light,
Still around.
is not only lasted for years and years on radio, it's now on television. It's probably been out there 50, 60 years. That's a good run, 50,
It
60
is.
years. Are we going to be doing this 50, 60 years
I
from now?
hope so.
We'll be doing this. I'll
I
be with
hope
a white
so.
beard. You'll be on a walker, and we'll
then,
talk about.
what will old radio be then, though? Satellite radio?
We'll talk about the old TV shows of the year 2000. You remember
That's
that
right.
show? Yeah, you remember
That's right.
Survivor? Do you remember that show? Some great stuff. We are actually kind of running out of time here, but when we get back, we're going to talk about some other great things and some other great stars of the old days of yesteryear, the old radio. So on this break, I want you to all run to the radio, turn on for a few minutes, and then run back to this show. So don't touch that dial.
When your professor cries, everybody down on the heel.
Yo, what's up, baby? Wanna learn some history? Check it out, check it out. Your GED right here, guaranteed, man. Come on, check it out.
Hey, how you doing? Educational videos, top quality, right here.
I got live learning, beautiful books inside.
The National Center for Family Literacy.
Yo, I got your arithmetic right here.
Because you can't get your GED on the street. Call 1-877-FAMLIT1 for free learning programs like GED and family computer classes.
Who needs a high school diploma, huh?
The National Center for Family Literacy. The first step to a better life.
And welcome back to Nostalgia Alley. Old Radio is our subject with Tom Jeron, executive producer here at Suma Television. One of the things I love about radio, don't have it anymore, those wonderful radio premiums.
Very cool
Tell us
stuff.
about those cool radio premiums.
The decoder rings, and Kellogg's Pep used to give out medals. They would give out medals for all the different, during the Second World War, all the different flying planes that were out there. All the different warplanes that America was flying, and you could get a medal of each one, or an imprint of it, or another time they would have the Little Orphan Annie decoder ring, and you would get the decoder ring if you ever saw the movie Christmas Story.
Oh, yes.
The kid gets the decoder ring, and he goes through all this trouble to get this decoder ring, and damn it, he gets through the whole thing, drink more Ovaltine.
Yeah,
it was
I love
nothing
that.
but an ad.
I love that.
But that's what they did.
And now, big collectibles, hundreds and hundreds of
Huge
dollars for these little
collectibles.
decoder things. And sorry I threw that off.
Hard to find buttons and things.
I used to date Orphan Annie, and she took the decoder ring away from me, so I don't know. Anyway, also, I love this. Walter Winchell, who, did Good Morning, Mr. and Mrs. America, always had this urgency and this excitement. And there was a trick to that.
There was. He used to drink coffee and lots of juice and whatever he could right before he went on the air. So he had to go to the can. And he would go through this whole thing. He would finish his show, good night, and then off to the bathroom.
I love it. I love it.
It was pretty cool.
Also, and I can never figure this out, Edgar Berg and Charlie McCarthy, ventriloquists on the radio.
And
incredible,
huge audiences, right? And again, Woody Allen's movie Radio Days, and they would be listening, and somebody would say, "Why do you listen to a ventriloquist on the radio?" But it was a big deal, and you know what? He was funny. He was funny. He was never that good of a ventriloquist anyway.
No, he was terrible. He didn't have to be a ventriloquist. So in the movie, he'd say, "Hi, Mr. Berg," and it was totally ridiculous. It was just hilarious.
Cut to the dummy.
Also, Gunsmoke. We all know James Arness on television, but he was not the first Matt Dillon.
Not indeed. It was William Conrad. Now, William Conrad you may know as Cannon from television, or the Fat Man from Jake and the Fat Man. And he looked like that back in the 50s and the 60s. And there was a very long period of time at the end of the 50s and the early 60s where Gunsmoke was on both the radio and TV. And they used to cross-advertise to the other program. So he would do the show, and then it would say at the end, "Don't forget to see James Arness." As Matt Dillon Gunsmoke, whatever time it was on, and they go back and forth. But do you know something else that's pretty cool about him? He was the voice of the narrator for the Rocky and Bullwinkle show.
Oh, he was?
Yeah, and he did like a Walter Winchell ripoff on there. Rocky and Bullwinkle, he'd go on and on. It's good stuff.
You sang when we were on break. You got to give us a rendition of this. The Pepsi and the Coke thing, the old Pepsi.
Pepsi Cola, right? They gave you twice as much for the nickel. Pepsi Cola hits the spot. 12 full ounces, that's a lot. Twice as much for a nickel, too. Pepsi Cola is the drink for you. And then they go nickel, 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 trickle, 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 trickle. I mean, that's how they did it. And they Pepsi
You're 37. Cola. How do you know this? It's unbelievable.
I just enjoy it.
Unbelievable.
I enjoy it.
Now, of course, the great radio hoax of all time was Orson Welles' War of the World. That was incredible. Had the nation in panic.
A huge panic, because they absolutely, from the beginning of the broadcast, there was only this one little disclaimer. And then they said, well, now we're going to take you to dinner music at such and such hotel. And they go there, and then the news starts breaking in that these aliens are landing in New Jersey. And people in Morristown are calling the National Guard. And people in Manhattan are running in the streets. And it was bedlam. It
Grover's
really
Corner, right?
was bedlam, yes, Grover's Corner.
They wanted to do Maplewood, but they changed their mind.
They were thinking about South Orange, but there was too much politics or something going on. But yeah, I mean, it was absolute bedlam, and he had to get on the air at the end of the program and apologize to the public for perpetrating this thing. But it was really brilliant. I mean,
he never got into a lot of trouble, though. I don't think from it, did he?
I don't hear any. A lot of trouble. I don't think
anybody died or anything got hurt.
No, but people panicked, and it was a mess. And there you go.
Now the other, they were one of the people that made the transition into TV. George Burns and Gracie Allen.
George Burns and Gracie Allen, and they had a tremendous radio career and a tremendous vaudeville career. But there was a time when they were just failures in vaudeville, and nothing was working. And the reason is that George, for a long time, played the stupid one. He wrote all the act, and he wrote all these, laughs where she would be the straight person and ask him, and nobody bought it. So all of a sudden he said, well, let's flip it around and see what happens. And he says, I'll take a puff on a cigar and just let Gracie answer.
Right.
And there were all these great things. He would go home and he'd say, Gracie, where'd you get those flowers? And she goes, well, it was your idea. And he'd say, well, how was it my idea? She says, well, you told me to go visit Clara in the hospital today, and you told me to take her flowers. And when she wasn't looking, I did. She would go.
Great stuff.
But I met George Burns in 1992 at the casino down in Atlantic City. Him and Bob Hope were doing one of their last tours together, and George Burns was 97 years old at the time.
God bless, that's incredible.
And he sat there and he would tell stories. He said, Gracie said one night she couldn't sleep. George, I can't sleep, make me laugh. So I made love to her and she laughed. I don't know. I mean, he probably used this bit 150 times, yeah. But it was so, and he meant it. There was this great love between the two of them, and he was always kind of, for 20 years after she passed away, he was like half a person. And then he had this resurgence with his movie career and what have not. But then he also said, the 97th birthday, they said, well, what are you going to do when you're 100 years old? And he says, for my 100th birthday, I'm going to play the London Palladium. Pause. I hope the Palladium's still there. And everybody just howled. And he didn't make it to his 100th birthday. He didn't get to play the Palladium because he fell right around his birthday. And it was just, but he did make it.
He would, God bless him. And then we're talking about transitions into TV. Now, Fred Allen had a show, Allen's Alley, on television, which is a big one.
On radio,
on radio, rather.
Fred Allen, well, the only thing that I recall from Fred Allen's program is that he had this ongoing feud with Jack Benny on the radio, and they used to go back and forth, and then they kind of guessed on each other's show, but it was just something that didn't take to TV. It was more of vaudeville-style comedy, and it didn't work on television. It wasn't something that panned out for them.
In fact, I owe Fred Allen a lot because the name Nostalgia Alley is basically a derivation of Allen's Alley.
Allen's Alley.
I hope I don't have to pay him royalties. He may come down from up there and say, I need the royalties.
How many people from his family may show up and demand money from Somacom? We could be in trouble here.
I shouldn't have said that. Now, this is a tough question, but I know you can answer it.
Yeah. What's
your favorite radio show?
Well, it's really a toss-up. It's a toss-up between Superman and The Shadow. I love them both. The Shadow, I mean, the mystery of that stuff is just, some of it's really hokey, but some of it's, it's so great, and to see the bad guys get it.
Yeah.
There was an episode of The Shadow I remember listening to where the thieves were blowing up buildings. It was this gang in New York, and it was very much like a terrorist kind of thing, but they were blowing up buildings for extortion money. That was their racket. And they were trying to figure out, well, how in the world are they getting explosives in? They would even say what building they were going to blow up. And then people go into the building and check it out, and Mom would check it out. Well, what they were doing is they were making explosive light bulbs. And they were putting them in all the fixtures, and then at night when the lights would go on, the building would blow up. It was kind of a brilliant script idea. And I thought, as a kid, whoa, that's some scary stuff.
Yeah. Look at Dick Tracy had the watch, and they could talk in the watch. We can do that now. We have cell phones.
We do.
It's
many of those things actually end up science fiction, and fiction become our reality.
And he was on the radio, Dick Tracy, I know, for a while too. That was a pretty good show.
Program.
I also, as a kid, remember a show, no one knows this show, a show called Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, about a detective. Had to be in the late 50s. And I remember we used to take trips in a 1950 Buick, and my parents would put it on, and it would be Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar. Phil Harris had a radio show, Jack Benny. It was just an incredible, I didn't want to get out of the car. It was just incredible.
Phil Harris recorded that song, what was it, Smoke Your Cigarette, right?
Yes.
Smoke. You wouldn't let that wouldn't go on today.
And believe it or not, he's still alive. Phil Harris is still alive. Still alive. He's in his 90s.
That is amazing.
Married to Alice Faye. That was and it was a long, long marriage. It's still around, which I find amazing. Absolutely amazing. News on the radio. A lot of historic things, news-wise.
Remember, that was it. No TV. There was no cable. And that was it. Radio was your only instant message. That was it. That was the only way it happened. The Hindenburg, people were down there. They're waiting for this incredible German technological advancement to land in Lakehurst.
Right.
And boom. And all of a sudden, and the announcers are screaming in terror and crying. And those recordings are as real as they get. You are brought to that moment immediately. And imagine, I mean, that's it. You're home and you're listening. That's it.
Well, he broke up on the air. He just couldn't control himself. That was incredible. That was absolutely incredible.
And I was down at Lakehurst and saw, like, they had little pieces of the ship. They have.
Oh, they did?
They actually have some of the metal framing from the dirigible.
Really?
They have it down at Lakehurst Naval Air Base still to this day.
Boy, that's.
You can go and see some of that stuff. And
that's
it's just
incredible.
Like you hear that and you shudder and you go, how in the world? And of course, Pearl Harbor.
Yes.
Pearl Harbor, when, you know, I mean, and all these different guys coming on the air, all leaves and furloughs canceled, and this happening and that happening. And then Roosevelt. I mean, Roosevelt was kind of like this equalizer for the nation. Even if you didn't like him as the president, here's our strong president coming to the mic. Yesterday, December 7th, 1941, a date which will live in infamy. There isn't anybody who hears that who doesn't know what it is. I mean, you're brought there immediately. And then the flip side, you got Hitler raising the Reichstag, and you hear these incredible speeches. I don't even know what he's saying, but you can hear this incredible emotion building and grinding.
Scary stuff.
And then Princess Elizabeth comes on, and Parevsky in Poland comes on, and you hear everything as it's going on, and the imagination carries you there. How cool.
They say radio is the theater of imagination.
It's a very cool thing.
And today you don't have that.
Nope.
You just don't have that.
People miss out.
You miss out on a lot.
People miss out. I was listening to the Yankee game the other night in the car as opposed to being in the house. And I actually pulled up in front of my house at a very crucial point of the Yankee game. And my kids are like coming to the door, come in and watch the game. No, I'm listening to the game. And I know if I get out and walk across the street, I'm going to miss something. And the announcer was doing a better job than it was on television.
The sad part is radio is very impersonal today. CBS FM went down the tubes after many, many years, played the oldies, had disc jockeys that were radio personalities, and now radio personalities don't really exist today. You have everything on computer and pre-programmed, and you don't have that charm of radio.
What it has become, there isn't even a disc jockey there, Jack.
Jack is terrible.
What is that?
You know.
I don't get it.
I don't get it either.
I proposed to my wife on CBS FM.
How did that work out?
It was pretty tricky, I'll tell you that.
How did you do that?
I was trying to think of a clever way to propose, and the one thing I'd come up with was putting a ring on a carousel down in the shore. And you know, as you come around to get the rings and what have not, and the guy would hand me the engagement ring, and I would put it on her finger on a carousel. And believe it or not, before I could do that, my wife figured it out. She figured it out. She figured it out. She says, "You're on Ocean Sea. You're going to propose to me on the carousel." And I said, "Oh man, I got to come up with something better." So I called cousin Brucey.
Oh yeah.
Anyway, it was really risky because I wasn't even sure he was going to respond. And we called the station and waited for him to call back. And Saturday night, which is the night I wanted to propose, rolled around, and that's when he was on the air. And he never called. And then all of a sudden he was on the air and he said, if anybody wants to fax anything in, fax it in. So we didn't have a fax machine. I had to write up a note and I ran it up to the local video store and paid the guy like $12 to fax this thing over to Manhattan. He got the fax, he called. I recorded the proposal and then he played it a little while later and she said yes. Otherwise I would have been real embarrassed in front of thousands and thousands and thousands of people.
That's terrific.
It was pretty cool.
How many years have you been married?
13.
13 years. 13. Seems like yesterday, doesn't it?
It seems like yesterday. My wife says it feels like 10 minutes underwater.
Is she a big radio fan?
She's getting to be.
Getting there? You've convinced her?
Some of the shadow programs are actually kind of gruesome, and she's like, they talk about cutting somebody's arm and amputation and things. Yeah. Whoa! And she says, I can't listen to that. Turn it off.
I guess there was a lot of censorship back then, right? Opposed to now. Now you can pretty much say what you want on the radio, but back then it was...
There was certainly...
Could you say pregnant on the air? Were you allowed to do things like that?
Pregnant was one of those things that the networks frowned upon.
Right.
Expecting.
Immaculate conception was what they used. Yeah, that's what they used. And the crazy things, like they had Bill Robinson, the tap dancer, on the radio. Tap dancing on the radio. I love it.
He was wonderful, and he really was. He was one of the most talented dancers on planet Earth.
Oh, he was
terrific. And yet,
terrific.
of course, it could have been just some guy tapping on a table. Who would have known, right? And then Edgar Berg and Charlie McCarthy, same thing. A huge, huge hit.
Very big hit.
Huge hit. I was like, whoa.
You know the famous story about Edgar Berg, and it was he was in Vegas doing a show, and he said to the audience, "This is the last show I'm doing. I'm retiring as of tonight." He went back to the dressing room. Half hour later, he was dead.
Oh my goodness! No,
Can you imagine that?
I didn't know that.
Yeah, that's pretty
story.
eerie. But what a way to go! I mean, if you're gonna go doing the thing you like best.
Say what you. That's right.
Oh, my heart! I feel a seizure. Do you think that radio now can come back like it used to come back, or do you think if it was introduced, people would embrace it like they did back then, or is it a whole different generation?
I think they'll embrace it as a novelty. I think you'll have spurts of, oh, this is a cool thing. This is just one of those things that, we can have a drama, we can have something at a holiday time. Focus on the family, which is not a lot of folks' favorite thing, but they do some radio drama, and they do it straight. And one of the things they do, they did A Christmas Carol last year with today's production values, and it's incredible. It's incredible when you hear that, and you go, my goodness. And the only thing that's not missing is the pictures there, because the sound recording is 28 tracks of rich sound effects and music and all these things, and it's done with digital technology, and they bring great actors in to do it. And it's just phenomenal. The other thing that's kind of making the rounds, and frequently local stations produce it around the holidays, is they get the old Lux Radio Theater script of It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, yes.
And they redo that on the radio.
Classic.
But now what they're doing is they're taking the radio scripts and they're performing them in a theater setting. Maplewood did it here with the Strollers. They actually did the It's a Wonderful Life. There's a group in the city who frequently takes the old mystery show scripts, and they set up in a coffee house and they videotape them for television, for public television. And they read the scripts and have 6 or 7 different mics.
We got about 1 minute to go, but a lot of Broadway theaters were made as a result of radio.
Absolutely.
The old studios.
Many of the old studios built these grand audience theaters for people to come in and sit and see, maybe 15, 20 minutes. Or,
you didn't have to play Broadway prices.
That's it. You didn't pay anything.
You just went and you had a show go on a Saturday night.
It was free.
Cheap date,
and they were giving out free tickets. Come in and see Bud Abbott and Lou Costello. Come in and hear The Shadow being recorded. Come in and hear Allen's Alley.
Great stuff.
What incredible stuff.
I think we're out of time.
I can't believe
Where'd it go? Where did the time
know.
go? Where is it? Under here?
I don't think so.
Anyway, Tom Jeron, our guest today, Old Time Radio, and I'll see you again real soon. And good night to you, and especially to
you.
You.